We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Jenny, for hitting record. Um, let's see. Again, if you did register and you had questions, I just want to let you know that we forwarded those questions to the speaker already. So hopefully some of those will be addressed today. If other questions come up while we get started, then you are welcome to either put them in the chat or write them down. But the speaker has requested, since there's a lot of information to get through, that we hold questions until the end. So we can help, bring those back up at the end. But otherwise you can hold questions, and there will be time, like 15 to 20 minutes at the end. If you would like for me to ask a question specifically, you can send me a chat during the time for Q&A, and I will ask the speaker. I would say also I would encourage you to keep your cameras on if you can. We know that there are a lot of reasons why people keep their cameras off, and respect that. And also we know that speakers like to speak to faces. So to make this as personal as we can, if you are able to turn your camera on, that's great. And then lastly, if you would please change your name on Zoom to the name that you registered for with this program, or for this program with. So we can go ahead and get started. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Shoshana Funk. I am the social worker and clinical services manager of helping at Jewish for Good. My colleagues are here, Stacy Abramowitz, Jenny Schwartz, and Jordana Brown. Thank you for joining us for the special program funded in part with grants from the Carolina Foundation for Jewish Seniors and the Leon Levine Foundation. So a little bit about Jewish for Good, if you're not familiar. Our helping department offers a comprehensive range of services that help people meet life's challenges. We deliver high quality professional social services for adults and their families through all stages of life. This includes counseling, case management, financial assistance, food pantry, and programs like this one. Much of what we offer is free, and all of it is open to everybody, Jewish or not. For more information, I invite you to visit our website, jewishforgood.org, to look at some upcoming programs we have planned, like Shmooze and Nosh, Care Partner Support Group, or Memory Cafe or Memory Care programs. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, who is Hugh J. Willard from Willow Way Counseling. The presentation title is There's Always Something New Under the Sun. Hugh J. Willard is a psychotherapist, singer-songwriter, and author with a career spanning more than 35 years. He has developed and taught courses on exploring identity, meaning, and creativity in the second half of life for numerous Osher lifelong learning institutes, including those at universities of Duke, Georgia, North Carolina State, and UNC Asheville. Hugh's first nonfiction book, Finding Beauty in the Gray, Stories in Verse from the Third Age, is newly out. His other published works include a children's chapter book series, The Goodwill Vultures Club, a young adult novel titled Digo Toga, if I'm saying that correctly, let me know, and a novella titled Clive's Crossing. He is currently working on his MFA in creative nonfiction at Bay Path University. Hugh also has a podcast series titled Aging Well, Finding Beauty in the Gray. This show explores the themes of identity, meaning, and creativity for the second half of life. So thank you so much, Hugh, for joining us today, and I will toss it over to you.
Joshana, thank you so much. And everyone else with Jewish for Good, I so appreciate you having me as a part of this conference. I'm excited to be with you all. And I was asked about sharing PowerPoint slides, and just real quickly, my preference is to be able to see you all. So if that is, if that's acceptable to most of us, I would prefer that. I understand sometimes folks do like to have the visuals to have as a part of the process as you're listening to me. So I don't, it's sort of on the fly here on the spot. So I don't know how to say straw poll or something like that. But if there's not strong objection, then I'll just continue like this. But if there's a great interest, then we certainly can pivot and put the slides up. I understand that you all did receive those or should have received those ahead of time. So hopefully you may be able to access those as we go. So, um, and we will have time at the end for questions. If there's something that seems more pressing and urgent that needs to be responded to in real time, then we can certainly do that. But I absolutely would like to respond to questions toward the end. I would love to share a number of things today, and understanding the balance of time. It's really going to be a primer of sorts. I want to give you guys some things to think about, and certainly that you will take time outside of this conversation and really spend just intentional time pondering, processing, integrating some of the ideas and the themes that we talk about. Um, I titled the talk today, "There's Always Something New Under the Sun." And of course, that's a play on the idea that there is nothing new under the sun. And I don't mean for this to sound too cutesy when I say this, but the truth is, on a very, well, qualitatively, I could say it's on a very technical level, but qualitatively, there is always something new under the sun. And that is that each of us is arriving at a point in time and a context in time that we have not been before. Thankfully, we have a lot of people who have gone before us, who have had these experiences in these particular time frames, and more, even more specific within certain variables and contexts. And they can share with us. They can say, here's what I experienced, and this is how it went, and this did not go well, and this went swimmingly. So we need those things. We need those resources. We need that sense of wisdom that comes from our elders, those who have gone before. And yet, there's always something new because we have not been at this particular point in our lives. We take what is given to us and we try to understand it, but we have to apply it. And we are going to bring our histories. And in large regard, there's a lot of overlap. There's certainly even sense of universality in some things that we experience, but there's always the combination of our histories, our experiences, um, our value set, our likes, our dislikes, the constellation of the folks around us in our worlds, in our support system. We get to this place where there is a sense of uniqueness that we bring to this moment in time in our lives. And so, truly, there is always something new under the sun. We each approach our experiences planned for and visited upon us, not planned for. And we bring what we can to bear on those things. But we are approaching them with a sense of newness if we can do so, if we can orient to that. And that sense of newness allows us to bring in both our resources and our histories, as well as our experience in the moment, and how do I choose to respond to this thing that may be unprecedented in my world, that may be frightening, that may be unexpectedly joyful. What do I do with this? So, always something new under the sun. That said, I would like to start us off with an image to guide us through our conversation today. And that image is one of a three-legged stool. Of course, a three-legged stool is it requires all three legs to be successful in doing its job and standing. You remove one of the legs, you have a problem. You shorten one of the legs, you have a problem. It's not that we constantly live in a state of balance that is required with a three-legged stool, but when we find ourselves out of balance, we want to be cognizant of that. We want to note that. We want to then attend to that and know that we need to shore up one of those legs. Okay, see what it needs and shore it up. And specifically, with this three-legged stool, we're going to talk about, of course, this three-legged stool is speaking to our experience in our lives and how it is that we are going to best navigate that which is in front of us now and what we anticipate may be coming down the path for us. So, and that three-legged stool, the particular posts for the stool include identity. That is one of the legs of the stool. Another one is meaning. If you were listening to Shoshana's introduction of me and some of the things that I've done, those two words figure prominently in what I do and what I share in my different seminars and trainings and teachings. And the third one is relationships. That speaks to the greater environment, our connection in many different forms and fashions. And it is each of those three that we need to attend to in order to be healthy and vibrant and have the best quality lives and experiences that we can today and going forward. And as I said a moment ago, it's not that we stay in a constant state of balance. There certainly are things that can come along and sort of swipe one of those legs of the stool and kind of get it off kilter, and we may fall over from time to time. The extent to which we, again, are understanding of how we are affected by things and then how we respond to try to remedy, certainly repair and get back to that state of balance. That's pretty much what life is. Not that I have all the answers, I certainly don't, but in my experience, both professionally and personally, that's a good model for us to think about how we attend to ourselves and our needs, while alongside of that, we are responding to and attending to the needs of our loved ones. So three-legged stool, keep that in mind as we're talking identity, meaning, and relationships. And let's start with a bit about identity. Um, and actually, we can't talk about identity, the first leg of the stool, without talking about the second leg of the stool, which is meaning. But I'll try to separate out identity for a few moments here. I asked a few questions in the slides, the PowerPoint that I sent to you all. And the first one is, who am I now? Okay. Um, and that question, I emphasize the now part of that because to know who I am now, it gives me an anchor, a reference point. Um, to know who I am now, I need to know who I was. So that is going to be that sort of archival perspective. Who was I at different points? And that also allows that some of the parts of who I was will remain. They will be a core part of who I am now. Okay. But there are changes. We are not statues. So there was a time when I was a child. I am no longer a child. And that may be a little bit of a stretch example, kind of ridiculous. Of course, I know I'm no longer a child. But to give kind of perspective about this sense of identity and how parts of it change, there was a time when I was a child. There was a time before I was married. There was a time before I was divorced. There was a time before I was a parent. And now I am a parent. And there was a time where I was a son of living parents, and my parents are now deceased. So that creates a new sense of identity for me. Along the way, there was a time before I was a caregiver to my parents. And then there was a time where I was a very engaged, active, overwhelmed caregiver for one parent at a time, along with one of my siblings. So all these things come into the fore at different times in terms of my sense of who I am, my identity. There was a time before I was in my professional capacity as a therapist, as a musician, as a writer. I actually am now transitioning as I am in school, as Shoshana mentioned. I will be moving into full-time teaching and writing, and I will be winding down my therapy practice. So that is an identity shift for me. A word here is transition, and we're going to come back to that word transition. It's an important word depending on where we are in life and how we respond to that. So identity, parts of it are immutable. They are core, and the extent to which we are tuned into that, that helps us manage the parts that do shift and change. We arrive to different times in life. We arrive to some of the changes that we experience. And these things do give some shape to, um, I'm looking at something here. It says, it's not who am I now because it is not a sudden change. We continually are in a state of becoming. That's all I saw on that. So that's true. But in order for us to manage the real time quality of our experience, we need to have some sort of anchor points. Some of those come from the core, the immutable parts of us, and other parts come from the actual identifying of what this change process is for me right now. Another way that I consider identity, if you can hold this visual, I didn't have this in the slides, but another way to think about this sense of identity as a visual, think of ourselves as a composite. So a composite, of course, is made up of numerous parts. And so if we have this, let's make it a sort of a spherical thing. We have this composite. This is who I am. And there may be parts of this composite that are relatively static, because they are established over time and they are reinforced. I've been a therapist for 35 years. That's a pretty strong element of identity, and it also goes into meaning. Um, and so that's pretty solid. And that doesn't go away because I am transitioning into full-time teaching and writing. That 35-year block of my experience that has been a feedback loop, a recycling, recirculating character of who I am and what matters to me, that remains. That doesn't evaporate because I'm going to go away from that and go into teaching and writing full time. It's still there as a part of the composite. But what comes in to this composite is a new piece that is going to glom on and will evolve and develop, okay, over time. And that is full time writing and teaching. So my composite expands, my composite gets larger, the form of it, the shape may evolve and look differently. But you will see, if you get the microscope out and you dig in and you look at some little particular part of your composite, you will see the elements. I was a child, okay? And there are pieces of that that are still evident in who I am today. My spirit for curiosity and wanderlust and risk taking, even though that can look different over the years. That's constitutional, okay? So it is a part of my identity. The application of it looks different over time and circumstance, and certainly, hopefully, learnings and wisdoms, and knowing that some things are not very wise to do. And so, I will no longer do those. I will look to manifest and apply these core parts of me in different ways. That's that's going into the dynamic nature of identity. Okay. Um, so I mentioned the what matters to me, and that's going into a little bit more about meaning. And sometimes people, they may swap the words in and out, meaning and purpose. We can get a little bit technical with this, but I'm just going to stay more general right now and say meaning or purpose. What we're looking at is that which matters to us. We can, and I'm sorry, the chats are popping up for me. I don't know if I can stop that, but anyways, meaning and purpose. What matters to me, and again, to be a little bit sort of fine tuning this or split hairing this a bit. Um, we oftentimes are going to think about purpose in a little bit more of the higher order capacity. What is my value set? What do I hold dear to me? And we could say the same for meaning, but meaning brings it a little bit more into the day-to-day kind of thing. And similar to identity, meaning or purpose, that will form over our formative years when we're younger, and it will be informed by experience, by interaction, by learnings. And so sometimes we come to value things at different points in our lives that we may not have had insight around or appreciation for when we were younger. And that was a more inchoate kind of quality of experience. So we may come to a greater fruition and integration of certain things, and they hold higher value for us. And they should, at that point, drive much of our thoughts and our decision making. But it's important that we stay tuned into that. In the slides, in the resources at the end, I list the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And so I'm imagining some folks are familiar with his work, but if not, and I'll just be very brief about this. He was in the concentration camps during World War II. He was a young Jewish physician. He was a psychiatrist, and he was there for several years. And through his time and observation and interaction with folks, he came to um, hypothesize about what is essential for our ability to survive and thrive. Many things are outside of our hands. Many things, of course, were egregiously outside of the hands of those that were in the concentration camps during World War II. But where folks who were longer term in the camps and who were able to um, survive, there wasn't a sense of thriving, but surviving to make it out after they were liberated. Um, One of the things, or the thing that Viktor Frankl was able to identify with folks through that experience was they had a discernible sense of purpose. Um, this did not need to be something that society would deem as having a higher order value, this sort of higher level of greater good for the community. It certainly could be, absolutely could be. And I don't want to be, disrespectful about this to say it could be that somebody's reason for not giving up and succumbing to the horrible conditions was that they had to get home and take care of their animals because that was a higher order purpose for them. They were working on a very personal, maybe they were writing their own memoir or bibliography. It didn't have to be something that anyone else deemed to be of value. It held value for the individual in question, and that there is a psychological valence to that helps folks to continue to drive in the face of unbelievable challenges. And so that was his theory, his hypothesis. And once the war was over and he was out of the camps and he went back to his work, he spent the balance of his life working on that theory that we have to identify that which matters to us, purpose, meaning. And it's again, I mentioned the word transitions a little earlier. It's easy for us at times to lose perspective about who we are and that which matters to us, contingent on what is coming in front of us in our path, particularly those things that are unanticipated. We may consider loosely at a younger age that there may be a time where I have to care for my parents, but there can be a character of such abstract or abstraction to that it's hard for us to really allot a number of resources to that. Because we also can just as equally consider that they're going to live long, healthy lives and they're going to die in their sleep. And so things do come in our path that we don't anticipate, certainly on a more direct level, that can throw us off. And that leaves us in that space of unexpected transition. And we may have difficulty being able to ground in who am I right now and what matters to me right now, because we're putting so much focus, attention, and energy into trying to respond to something in the moment. So the extent to which we cultivate and do the work of really staying tuned into ourselves over time, that will support us through the time and quality of transitions that we have. Um, More directly, I want to take a few moments to talk about when we come into, and there's different ways to talk about the second half of life, or the phrase I use is the third age. Um, there are a number of transitions that become a part of our experience. And we can anticipate and plan for some of those as I'm referring to. Um, but then when we get there, there can be a whole different quality of experience. And I don't want to be too dramatic with this phrasing of this, but the idea that, once again, there's always something new under the sun. I can plan for retirement. I have thoughts about that. And I can certainly financially plan, and I can have ideas about how I will spend my time, how I want to spend my time. But I can't fully get there until I'm there. I once I absolutely am experiencing it, that brings me the last piece of the puzzle for that particular time and context. How does this feel to me? How does it align and match with what I expected it to feel like, or the thoughts that I would have that's a part of this? How closely do they align? It's not unusual that there can be some quality of that experience that will be unexpected. Um, when we move into the third age, as I call it, and I'll just say this one time, there's always exceptions. So when I'm speaking to different qualities and characters of experience, there are always exceptions. And as I say these things, you may recognize some exceptions for yourself that don't fit cleanly with what I'm describing. So I'm having to sort of speak a little bit in generalities here. There are two defining characters of coming into the third age of life, and they are, I'll put two words together here: time and freedom, and then conjoining those would be the other one, and that is loss. Okay. And we will experience those whether we are paying attention to those or not. And I'm suggesting, of course, that it's good to pay attention to these things. Um, time and freedom, typically for folks who end careers, be that vocations outside of the home or vocations within the home, raising family. There is an art to these things, and there is a time where they do come to a close. So we walk away from vocation. We say our goodbyes. That may mean the loss of some relationships that were a regular part of our experience. It may mean a loss of structure that was, again, a regular part of our experience. And potentially it may mean a loss of community in the sense that we may relocate, if that is in the cards, if that's the plans that we have. And so we have all those things that are a part of that transition. The flip side of that coin is we have opportunity. And because of the change of structure, be it again in the home or out of the home, the children are grown and doing their thing, the career has come to a conclusion. We have opportunity and we have choice. Within our means, we have choice. What is it that I want to do today? Um, and of course, there can be a bit of a honeymoon with that. I don't want to be too cliche with that, but it certainly can be depending on the what our experience was like with being in the home and raising the family, or working outside of the home, or doing both. Um, the idea that I am no longer largely, accountable to and having to answer to other folks, that can be a pretty good feeling for many of us. So we have opportunity, we have choice. We can decide to travel, we can decide to volunteer, we can decide to spend more time in pursuit of interests of all sorts. So those are the one side of the coin, but then we have the sense of loss that's the other side of the coin. Um, and how we choose to engage those experiences really matters. I have plenty of my clients for whom, they approach the transitions that come in the third age, with this mix of excitement and trepidation. Um, some more one than the other, excitement or trepidation. For those who approach it with more excitement, Again, I don't want this to sound too much like a caricature, but the extent to which they really ground themselves in expectation with what's coming for them. Sometimes they stumble a bit. They have sort of a strong start out of the gate, but then there comes this character of staleness. And uh, almost without exception, I can look at that and I can align that with or assign that to they've lost the important process of continuing to track who am I now, what matters to me now. Interests, one way of answering the question, what matters to me now, is to talk about baseball matters to me, and that's true. That's not a random example. I love baseball. And as I have more time, I hope to catch more baseball games. And that feeds me in a way. It stimulates me. It's not enough. That is not speaking deeply enough to the idea of purpose and meaning. So we can have interest and we can pursue those, but if we don't have a ground that's a little bit more or a lot more in the things that have a greater valence for us, we're going to struggle. So we need to stay tuned into those questions. I'm not going to suggest that we need to navel gaze and every day have this deep dive into this existential character of, who am I? What matters to me? I don't want to make light of that. I don't want that to sound disrespectful or mocking, because we do need to spend time in pursuit of those explorations. But we need to live. We need to be present to our day to day, and that includes our environments, our activities, our structures, our relationships. And so we have to have that toggle. We have to have that balance, that ability to be a part of the experience while also evaluating who am I and what matters to me. So um, let's go over to speaking a little bit about environment and relationships. So another question is, what people and places hold special meaning for me? What people and places hold special meaning for me? When we bring in the idea of the qualities of time, freedom, and loss that are part of the changes that we go through, this is going to come into focus as a key part, and this is the third leg of the stool, of the three-legged stool, the relationships. We have relationships. Obviously, we have relationships with people. We tend to, most of the time, we tend to think, if we say, tell me about your relationships, we tend to think about, well, I have my family, I have my friends, I have my community, I have my work environment, other sorts of things. We think of those, and that's right. It's right that we do that. But relationships are actually broader than that, and they do speak to our relationships with our environments more broadly. What is my relationship to nature? What is my relationship to my faith experience? That, of course, can sound a little more abstract. What is my relationship to my interest in my activities? Baseball, for example, for me. So that is the third leg of the stool. And of course, when we think about the quality of our relationships, there is this sense of where do I sit within the dynamic, and if it's linear enough, or yeah, I'll just say linear enough, we could say the dyad. And that dyad could be with an individual or a thing, or it can be a larger or broader community. So, what's my part in this process? So, and that, again, the extent to which we have a sense of who we are and what matters to us, that is going to support and fulfill the quality of the relationships that we have. Um, so, important work for us to continue on with. Um, I mentioned on a few occasions now transitions, and we have large transitions and we have small and medium transitions that move through the course of time for us. And how we manage those is always really, really important. Um, One of the slides that is in the presentation that you all have talks about support roles. Okay. And when I speak of support roles, I am referring to the relationships with individuals. And sometimes we get ourselves into trouble because we have expectations that are misaligned. And it's important that we take time to think about the people relationships that we have over time. How do they change? Where do I make adjustments and calibrations? And I know that language sounds mechanical and a bit clunky, and it's a clunky way to describe human relationships. But for the sake of just giving some clarity to what I'm saying here, you know, where do I make those adjustments when there is loss? Um, my mother, who was my best friend, has passed away. What do I do with that? Of course, there's this whole process of grieving, and in and around and a part of that is my adjustments with my sense of identity and again, purpose and meaning. So the roles that she served for me, what do I do with that? I'm experiencing a hole. How do I go about accessing, connecting with other places where I can get comparable quality of, support with respect to my day-to-day experience? This sounds like it's a bit of an egocentric thing, and to just briefly say, the quality of relationship, there has to be a character of reciprocity within the definition of that. Okay. There's nothing that is or shouldn't be one way. And so we certainly give and we receive. And so there's value in both of those qualities of experience. It goes back to the sense of identity, purpose, and meaning as a function of that. So the support roles, when we have those expectations misaligned, and so there's somebody in my sphere, let's say it, in my circles, and I'm having a particularly difficult time in a transition, experiencing a loss, uh, for example. And I deem that to be of significant um, weight. It's a really extraordinary quality of experience that I'm having. And I decide that this person in my sphere, who ordinarily is not really good at listening, not really good at being empathetic, responding in those ways, but I consider that I am in such challenge right now that they will be able to um, read that and they will be able to respond outside of their baseline, outside of their norm. We certainly know there are examples of that. We see that happens, in the news or maybe in our personal settings. We see where somebody does something and we call that heroic, because it's outside of their baseline. And we may, in our own sort of distortion of experience and transition, think that some person in my sphere is going to do that. They're going to step up. They don't ordinarily step up this way, but they're going to step up. And then they don't because people are fairly consistent. I don't want that to sound too, fatalistic or pessimistic, but people are fairly consistent. But I had the wrong expectation in that moment. I'm going to be unnecessarily um, disappointed or hurt. My hurt may be more extensive because I had a misplaced expectation. So I need to know within my world who are the people who are, I'll say, traditional supports. They're good listeners, they're empathetic, they're very responsive. Who are those folks? I need to have those folks identified. Who are the people who are the encouragers, who are going to give me perspective that I may not be able to hold when I'm in a time of transition and challenge and instability? They're going to give me the possibilities in life. Okay. Who are the people who are the straight shooters? They're going to give me, their perspective. So it's not that they're always right, but or accurate, but they're going to call it like it is. There's no hidden agenda. There's no backstory to it. They call it like they see it. You know, they're not in my echo chamber. I need that sometimes. Okay. Who are the people who are going to offer distraction and fun for me? And fun may be a word that we have to consider. Does it fit for the context or not? But if I just need a break from the challenges that I'm experiencing, and this person maybe is going to focus more on themselves, um, who are those individuals? And as long as I'm clear and understanding, they're not going to be a good listener and they're not going to give me a lot of empathetic feedback, but we're going to have some distraction and I need that right now. Okay, that's the person I need to go to. Who are the worker bees? Who are those that care deeply, but maybe are not that, their gift is not really expressing that, but they're there and they want to help. And the way they do that is by attending to tasks. You need your dry cleaning picked up. You need me to go pick up the grandkids or go to the store and get something. I'm your person. I will do that for you. So I'm just laying out some of these different um, sort of qualities of support roles that we need to identify in our lives generally, and certainly in times of transition when we need that support. And it's not that folks are siloed into one type of role. There are some folks who may serve two or three or four of those roles. The extent to which we know them, then that's going to guide us in helping us with our expectations. And again, as I said, there's reciprocity here. So we serve these roles for others as well. So it's not just one way. Um, our relationships, I'm speaking more generally here, but for a number of us, there are these very close primary relationships. Hopefully, they are with our partners and with our spouses. And so, the extent to which the closer sort of calibration of these transitions that we go through, the closer those relationships are, the likelihood is that we're experiencing those transitions together. Okay. And so there's something that can be very comforting about that because there's the shared quality of experience. We each can relate to it. Um, Obviously, that's not everyone's experience. And of course, certainly if there's the loss of a partner or a spouse, then that can be a very significant transition and change. And we have to look to those other established connections that we have to support us in those times of transition. Um, so three-legged stool we're talking about here: identity, meaning, and relationships. Um, Again, it's not as though we live in a constant state of transition. It is reasonable for many of us to have the expectation that in times in the time of life that is the third age, we will make choices that will lead to some length and some stability that is this new time of life. So when the family is grown and gone, when we come to the end of the arc that is our careers, and we move into the new phase, that we will have time, as we mentioned, time and freedom, and the choices we make that align with who am I now, what matters to me, and then again, who are the people and the places that hold special meaning for me. Um, all of that information can be put together and help us to say, these are the things that I want to invest my myself, my emotional energy, my spiritual and cognitive and physical energy in engaging in, and there will be some length to that, and that bears great fruit and it certainly can hold for a length of time. And that matters too, because the extent to which we have established ourselves in the third age of life, when these particularly unanticipated transitions are visited upon us, when there is loss, when there is diminishment of health, that is for partner, potentially sometimes child, but certainly for parents, and then we move into a more active caregiving role, we have a solid base. We have that nice firm foundation that we've been able to cultivate over time, and that then comes into a real place of importance for us when we are managing that next transition or those next transitions that come for us. Um, one of the one of the last slides in the PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to quickly just talk through. These are a little bit more practical considerations to support us, really at any time of life when we're dealing with transitions. But so for those of you that may have access to that right now, you can look at these. But if you don't have access right now, certainly go back and pay attention to. But there are a number of bulleted items there, and they include pay attention to personal signs of stress. Um, Again, we live in the day to day, and there are distractions, there are obligations of whatever form they take, and based off of choices we make. So it's important that we have a sense of how do I know when I am coming into a time of greater stress? Sometimes those cues are subtle. Where does it register in my body? What are the choices I make when coming into that particular time? And and the thoughts that may be particular to when I look back over my history, these are indicators for me that I am in a time of stress. It's important that we have some access to that and some understanding to that. And I'm getting a little thing on my computer that's telling me to plug it in. Um, Allow for deviation from baseline and adjust expectations, but strive for structure and routine. Structure and routine are a feedback loop for us. They give us a sense that some things are predictable. Okay. And we need that. We can't live life in a state of constant flux and not knowing what's around the corner. But when we are in times of transition, there's going to be disruption to that baseline, to those structures and routines. So we need to know that and not try to hold too hard because we have to allow for some of the deviation. But at the same time, the things that we can do that are a part of our routine, we need to try to do. Control the controllable. That's another feedback loop thing when things are outside of our control. I suggest a 3-item list. That's a thing where you're going to do 3 things a day, not grandiose things, 3 small things a day that are within your purview, within your control. That's important that you do that because that tells you that there's still things that can be accounted for and managed. Look for accountability and support in the community and in your home. Just speaking about the relationships. Um, Use your environment to help you. Don't reinvent wheels. Are there things that help you to ground? Are there things that help you to de-stress and calm? Music is a very common one. That happens for a lot of folks. I do teach some seminars on music. Of course, it's very personal, but it can be used in a very intentional way to support us when we're going through transitions. Um, Expand your use of social media and digital access, but this needs to be targeted. It can be a distraction, but it also could be something that pulls you away from attending to the things that you need to attend to. So that's important to pay attention to. Manage news intake. Some of us are news junkies, but that can provide a backdrop of sort of low grade stress for us if we're not careful. So we need to manage that. Mindfulness, if you're not familiar with mindfulness practices, that won't fit within the purview of our time today. But I do encourage you to explore that, learn more about that, and to take advantage of that really on a daily basis. That becomes an important part of foundation for us managing transitions. Absolutely. Some of the tried and truths are sleep, diet, and exercise. We can never overstate the importance of those things in our lives. That can be its own 3-legged stool. Um, Sleep, diet, and exercise, getting out in nature when and where you can. Those are quick hits. You'll see those in again, in your slides. As I mentioned at the top, this is really meant to be a primer. As folks are interested, you can certainly, I suppose maybe the folks with Jewish for Good can give you all access to my information. I am happy to have more conversation with any of you, email or phone or anything like that, to expand upon any of these things that we're talking about today. I know that we're going to be doing questions. Someone's asking about accesses to the slides. I suppose Stacy or Shoshana will help you guys with that. So, um, but happy to have any follow up. Just if you reach out to me, just mention that you were a part of the Jewish for Good conference, so I'll know that. But we'll do some questions now. And so I know there are a number of ones in the chat, but Shoshana or whoever may want to help guide some of that, and I'll respond as best I can.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Hugh, for that wonderful presentation and for all that information and for sharing so much of your own kind of personal perspective. I appreciate that, and I think others do as well. In terms of the slides, just to address that, so I know Stacy sent out the link this morning. So if you go back to that email, the slides are sent as an attachment to that email. If you can't find it, I'd be happy to send them to you again if you do need. We tried to put them in the chat, but it's hard we weren't able to figure that out. So I would say first go back to that email, and then if you aren't able to access them there, then let us know. Okay, so I also just want to note that there are some extra resources. So I'm going to put that in the chat now. These are resources that you can refer to after that Hugh, I think you provided for us based on some of the things that he shared with us today. And just to go back into the chat to see if there's any sort of specific questions for Hugh. Let's see. I'm just trying to address sort of like the housekeeping piece. Well, one thing that Dorita Berger mentioned is that it's not who I am now because it is not a sudden change. We continually are in a state of becoming. So I am a continuous question of who am I becoming as I age. So I think that was about your piece about sort of
Sure.
transitions and sort of how that composite piece.
I'm
So
actually looking through these as well now, Shoshana. So.
okay. Okay, so that's not really a question, but just something interesting that somebody had to add. But does anybody have any specific questions for Hugh about the content of what he's talked about today?
Don't be shy.
You're welcome to put it into the chat or unmute. I see Dorita, you raising your hand.
Yes, my sort of overall question is you use the term the third age, which I think is wonderful, but immediately the image in my mind came as the third age being the third leg of the stool.
Oh, okay. Two different things. Yeah. Yeah.
So would you say that that third leg is actually perhaps the most important? In other words, the third age,
The third age.
becomes the balance of your life.
That's a great thought, Dorita. That is a wonderful thought. And just to, I'll give a little more context to, if there's a third age, that means there's a first and a second age. Okay. And so generally considered among developmental psychologists and other folks. So the first age would be the time of youth, 0 to 18, 0 to 20, 25. The time of it's a lot of change, a lot of rapid development, not knowing who we are, coming into individuation, exploring, starting to get a sense of where I'm going to take my life forward. Second age is this broad expanse of being identified in family and relationships and career and vocation. And that is a broad swath of time. And then, as you were hearing in our conversation today, we come into the third age, and that's really when those other things are coming to the close of their arc. And so, but it is a time. So there is synthesis and integration, and that is when I think of your statement and question, Dorita. That's what I think about. Um, because there is opportunity then to use our histories and to have a sense of accounting and exploring and integrating those into the changes that have happened over time. So there is this sense of solidifying, what matters to me and who am I now. But we're not finished. So it is a very important thing to think about the just that third age as being this really solid grounding and founding for us over the course of our lives, which in to follow a typical trajectory, the third age will go to the fourth age, and that's the final age. And the fourth age is the full summation. It is the time of preparation for death. Again, exceptions noted because things happen unexpectedly. But if someone has an organic and a typical lifespan, the third age still allows for our engagement and active involvement in life, where the fourth age is the ultimate sort of summation and answering, any unanswered questions, not again to make that too dramatic, but any unanswered questions we may have or any unfinished business that we may have. But the large sense of synthesis and integration, yes, when we are being intentional and when we are tuned in, that's going to happen in that third age. So it is a super key time. Great
So
thoughts.
I just feel that I'm stronger now in my third age because I've been there. I know more. I've done more. I've accomplished. I'm a music therapist, by the way, so
Wonderful.
I know what music can do. But as you talked, I kept thinking, this is my most important age now because I have all the resources now for myself, for me to strengthen myself.
Yeah.
So
Yes, and thank you, Dorita. And I'll just say, and it's important to say, it's just important to say, there is not a one-to-one correlation with age, experience, and wisdom. And that matters. And I don't want to step on anybody's toes. We have work to do, and I don't mean work as in breaking rocks and doing laborious things. We have, internal work to do that is understanding our experiences and tying those into who am I now, what matters to me now. The work that we do around that creates that integration that is ultimately wisdom, that becomes legacy, that which we share to those around us, and the value of that for us. So yeah.
thank you.
There's another question in the chat about how to end a friendship that is no longer nurturing that
Oh boy,
reciprocal.
that is so tough. That is so tough, and I feel for anyone in those experiences. That is so tough. Um, well, I'll give the best answer I can. It would go. I could be much more helpful if I had a lot more of the specifics. But in general, um, you have to stay tuned into that this is unhealthy. I'll speak in the first person. This is unhealthy for me. Um, and there's no one right way to end and we could stay with unhealthy or toxic relationship. Um, but I will say that one of the important things there is you cannot allow people and things outside of you in this particular experience. You cannot allow those to define you or evaluate you. Okay. Many of us consider ourselves to be good people. Many of us consider ourselves to be caring, unselfish people. And if we make a choice for ourselves to say, I can no longer be in relationship with you, um, that person or other people around may respond with confusion, um, consternation. They may not have enough insight, and so they may label it as selfish. And it's hard for us to hear those things because it's very contradictory. It doesn't fit for us, and so that can sort of stir us, and we can feel guilt around those things. So we have to stay grounded in, this is not healthy for me. It's not, I don't need to continue this. Now, whatever your value set is in terms of how you go about ending that relationship, please remember that if you deem it to be unhealthy for you to engage in a direct conversation in sharing that I no longer can be in relationship with you, if there's something about that that it will have an abusive potential character to it, and that's not only physical, but it's certainly also emotional, okay, and spiritual. So you don't have to put yourself in that position, okay? Many of us will say, well, I owe this person an explanation, okay? And if you feel that's appropriate, that's within your value set, and you're going to do that, well, then, yeah, I certainly say yes, absolutely. It will be very uncomfortable. But you will feel like that's the right thing for you to do. But if you chose to end it by, another means, indirectly, um, please be kind to yourself and say, this is what I had to do, and this is the way I had to do it. Guilt is so easy for us to fall into. And that's a distortion. And I was talking a lot about transitions. Um, the end of a friendship, there, inherent in the definition of that tells me there was, for some length of time, there was something about that relationship that had value for the individual in question. Okay. And so there's loss there. Now, in all likelihood, to come to the place where the person's considering, I need to end this relationship, they are already experiencing that sense of loss and grieving that, and maybe moving further along in that. But still transition. There still can be the worry about how I will be judged. And that's hard, but the more we spend the time working on ourselves, we're going to have that solid foundation. My choice is an important choice for me. It doesn't mean I'm a terrible person. It doesn't mean I'm a selfish person. This is what I needed to do for me.
Thanks. There was also a question about the three legs of the chair and what they are. So some folks did respond in the chat that it was identity, meaning, and relationships. But if you
Yeah.
wanted to expand upon the three legs of the stool again.
Sure. It's the questions we ask ourselves, who am I now? Because we are composites. There are parts of us that are active and will remain active throughout the length of our lives, in terms of, how I identify myself. But there are parts that are transient. There are parts that change over time. And we don't lose those in the sense that they stay within us, within our composite, but they may not have an active character, and other things may come into a more active time. I've never been in retirement before. This is a new experience for me. So that has a greater sense of agency and action than does the fact that I was, I was, an athlete when I was younger. And that had much meaning for me and importance for me. And that's changed now. So, that has history, but it's not a active part of my sense of identity now. Meaning, what matters to me, again, some of that will remain core throughout much of our lives, our value set, but there can be changes in that based on our experiences. We need to be open to understanding how we are affected by our experiences and how those may shape what we deem to be, intrinsically important and valuable to us. And then the relationships, once again, that speaks to choices we make in how we spend our time in environments and with people. And, of course, I didn't use these words, but some of us are extroverts, some of us are introverts, some of us sort of sit in the middle, that ambiversion quality. There's not one right way to be, but none of us is made to be outside of relationship. That is a part of our neurological makeup. We are social beings. The makeup of that, how that looks, can vary from person to person, but we are not made to be completely outside of relationships. So it matters that we cultivate those things as we go through time and changes and transitions.
Great, thank you. Someone said every stage of life has transitions, and by the third age, we have experience with this. The key ingredient is making it through transitions to a good place, with an abundance of kindness to ourselves and to and from others.
So well said.
Does anyone else have a question or a thought that they would like to share that got sparked by today's speaker? Okay. Well, I'm going to put the links for further resources from Hugh Willard today. And the PowerPoint can be found there as well, thanks to our marketing guru, John DiMartino, who's here with us today. And I will send out an evaluation for today's talk, or Stacy will, I think, next week. So stay tuned for that. And just want to thank you again, Hugh, for such a wonderful and enlightening conversation, important conversation for all of us today. And someone said it perfectly, today's session is so very meaningful and provides very much needed information for me currently. Thank you all. So thanks to everybody for coming. We look forward to seeing you at other talks this week. And thank you again to Hugh.
I very much enjoyed it. Thank you all for coming along. For those who celebrate, happy last day of Passover. I certainly pray you peace and all goodness going forward. So, bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.